There are secrets in Egypt's royal tombs that still leave us horrified today. Kings and queens, whose bloodlines were so twisted, their bodies broke under the weight of their own family's power. These are not myths or curses whispered in desert winds. They are real medical horrors recorded by historians and revealed in modern autopsies. From pharaohs born with fused spines to rulers who could barely stand from genetic deformities. Today we unveil 7 of the most inbred pharaohs in Egyptian history. And number 1 will haunt you long after this video ends. But before we unearth these royal nightmares, click like and subscribe to join history's hidden horrors, where the past never rests in peace. At number 7, we begin with Narmer, the first pharaoh of unified Egypt. To his people, he was a living god, the falcon-eyed Horus on earth, the ruler who forged 2 lands into one. But behind the triumphs carved into his ivory palette lies a dark decision that would shape Egypt's destiny for thousands of years. Narmer's reign marked the birth of pharaonic power. Yet in the candlelit chambers of his palace, lined with scenes of victory and divine blessing, he faced a question no mortal king had ever asked. How does a god choose a queen? His priests whispered the answer like gospel truth. His advisors nodded, eager to please. No woman of mortal blood could ever share his bed. To keep his lineage divine, he had to marry someone who shared his sacred essence. So Narmer turned to the only woman deemed worthy, his sister. From childhood, they had played together on polished stone floors, bathed in lotus-scented pools, and learned that their blood carried the very spark of Ra. Their wedding was a spectacle of drums, flutes, and chanting priests, declaring the union of 2 gods on earth. But what they called divine was in truth a ritual of silent horror, because this was not love. This was not devotion. This was the first calculated act of genetic isolation, breeding purity at the cost of humanity. In Narmer's children, the effects were faint, but unmistakable. His son's jaw jutted forward more than normal. His daughter's spine curved just enough to cause pain with every step. To the priests, these were signs of holiness, divine marks proving that godhood flowed undiluted in their veins. But to modern eyes, they were the first whispers of a coming storm, a genetic curse buried under golden crowns and sacred incense. Psychologically, Narmer's decision set a precedent that turned generations of royal children into prisoners of their own blood. Pharaohs believed marrying siblings was a duty to the gods. It became law, religion, and national identity all at once. And here is a detail few ever hear. In Narmer's tomb, alongside symbols of power and war, archaeologists found tiny ivory carvings of infants with disproportionately large heads and twisted limbs, likely toys representing his own deformed children, immortalized not as heirs, but as divine curiosities. This was only the beginning. The first stone laid in a pyramid of suffering, a legacy of broken bodies, shattered lives, and silent prayers for relief that would never come. At number 6, we have Sneferu, the pharaoh hailed as Egypt's greatest pyramid builder. He reigned around 2600 BCE, overseeing the construction of the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid, monuments that still pierce the desert sky today. But while his reign was etched in stone as an era of architectural triumph, his body carried the hidden cost of a lineage obsessed with purity. Sneferu was born to parents who were brother and sister, a union sealed to keep the blood of Ra undiluted. He ascended the throne with the confidence of a man who believed he was a living god. Yet beneath his linen robes and golden regalia, the signs of genetic damage were undeniable. Descriptions of his skeletal remains suggest a pronounced overbite that deformed his jawline, an elongated skull likely caused by both natural deformity and ritual shaping, early onset joint pain with evidence of bone lesions suggesting chronic arthritis before the age of 40. Imagine ruling an empire stretching from the Sinai mines to Nubia's gold, while every step you took burned your hips and knees with pain. Politically, Sneferu's condition remained a tightly guarded palace secret. Priests spun his deformities as symbols of divinity, claiming his unique features proved he carried the god's power within his flesh. But behind closed doors, servants spoke in fearful whispers. His temper was known to shift from radiant generosity to explosive rage without warning, a psychological consequence of chronic pain and genetic strain. And here is a chilling detail few know. When archaeologists examined burial texts from Sneferu's reign, they discovered hidden prayers not for his strength or victory, but for relief from the ceaseless gnawing in his bones. His greatest monuments, the pyramids that reshaped Egypt forever, may have been his desperate offering to the gods, a bargain to ease the agony inflicted by his own bloodline. Sneferu's reign stood as a testament to ambition built on silent suffering, because beneath every limestone block he ordered into place lay the truth that even Egypt's mightiest builder could not escape the curse of inbreeding. At number 5, we have Akhenaten, the pharaoh who dared to challenge Egypt's gods, but could never escape the gods within his blood. Born in 1353 BCE to a royal family riddled with centuries of sibling marriage, Akhenaten entered the world already marked by deformity. Imagine a boy crowned as a living god, yet every mirror reflected a body that defied human expectation. His skull was elongated, stretched unnaturally high and narrow. His hips were wide, like a woman's, an unsettling curve in royal portraits. His chest bore small breasts, defying the masculine ideal of Egyptian kingship. Palace servants avoided his gaze, bowing deeply to hide their discomfort. Priests scrambled for explanations, calling his shape divine mystery or manifestation of the Aten's light. But behind the temple chants lay the brutal truth Akhenaten was the product of genetic collapse. Psychologically, these deformities carved scars deeper than bone. Growing up, he saw temple walls covered with images of god-kings, broad-shouldered warriors with perfect proportions. His own reflection told a different story, a twisted body, trapped in a shell it could not command. When he became pharaoh, Akhenaten did something no king had ever dared. He ordered artists to portray the royal family realistically. Gone were the idealized depictions. In their place stood images so haunting, they remain unsettling today. Men with swollen bellies and curved spines, women with elongated skulls and sunken eyes, children with the same twisted features as their parents. Historians call this an artistic revolution, but in truth it was a man tired of hiding. If his body was a temple to the gods, then the gods must look like him. And here is a chilling detail few ever hear. Archaeologists have found miniature statues buried in Amarna temples depicting children with elongated heads and fused spines. Silent proof that Akhenaten's deformities were not unique, but shared by his daughters and sons who died before reaching adulthood. Politically, Akhenaten's genetic horror shaped his rule. His abandonment of Egypt's ancient gods for the sole worship of Aten was perhaps not pure faith, but desperation. If the old gods had cursed his bloodline with endless suffering, perhaps a new god would show mercy. But even a new god could not erase the damage etched into his DNA. Akhenaten died young. His religious revolution died with him. His city was abandoned to the desert winds, and his memory was carved out of history by priests eager to erase his heresy. Yet his twisted statues remain, haunting reminders that even a king who challenged the heavens could never escape the curse that flowed in his veins. At number 4, we have Tutankhamun, the golden boy king whose mask dazzled the world, hiding a body that was slowly falling apart. Born in 1341 BCE, Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten and his own sister, a union forged to keep divine blood pure no matter the cost. Imagine being crowned pharaoh at 9 years old, worshipped as a living god. Yet every breath, every step was a silent battle against your own body. Modern scans of his mummified remains reveal a horrifying truth. His left foot was twisted inward, a severe clubfoot that forced him to walk with a cane. His spine was curved, making standing upright an ordeal. His ribcage was deformed, compressing his lungs and making it hard to breathe under Egypt's blazing sun. His immune system was so weakened, a simple case of malaria, easily survived by a healthy body, became a death sentence. Psychologically, Tutankhamun lived a life of isolation and pain. He grew up surrounded by priests chanting his divine perfection, while servants discreetly positioned walking sticks and chairs to keep him upright during ceremonies. The boy king who ruled an empire could barely stand without help. In his tomb, archaeologists found over 130 canes and staffs, not symbols of power, but tools of survival for a crippled god. Each was carved with protective prayers and lined with gold, desperate attempts to preserve the illusion of strength. Politically, his frailty made him a puppet. Advisors ruled in his name. Generals signed treaties under his seal. Priests restored the old gods he was too weak to oppose. Tutankhamun's reign became a tragic theater, a broken child on a golden throne used as a divine mask for others' power. And here is a chilling detail few ever hear. Alongside his treasures, tiny coffins lay buried, the mummified remains of two stillborn daughters, both severely deformed silent victims of the same genetic curse that was killing their father. Tutankhamun died at 19. Some say from infection after breaking his leg, others from malaria. But the truth is simpler and far more tragic. He died because his body was never built to survive. His golden mask became his immortality, preserving a face that hid rotting bones, twisted limbs, and a legacy of royal incest that transformed Egypt's divine bloodline into a dynasty of suffering. At number 3, we have Ramesses D, known as Ramesses the Great, Egypt's mightiest pharaoh. He ruled for 66 years, built colossal temples, and left his name carved deeper into history than any ruler before or after. To his people, he was a god among men. To his enemies, an immortal conqueror. But beneath the towering statues and golden thrones, his blood carried the silent curse of generations. Ramesses II was born into a royal line that still practiced occasional sibling marriage, though less intensely than the Amarna dynasty. He himself married multiple daughters and granddaughters in ritual unions designed to maintain divine purity. A chilling reminder that even Egypt's greatest ruler was bound to the old ways. Physically, Ramesses appeared strong in youth, but modern CT scans of his mummy reveal severe dental abscesses rotting his teeth and infecting his jawbone. Advanced arthritis causing pain so intense, he walked hunched over with a staff in his final decades. Evidence of atherosclerosis hardening his arteries despite a royal diet. Psychologically, the pain transformed him. Palace scribes wrote of a once vigorous king turning irritable and reclusive in old age, his temper flaring at advisors, his decrees growing harsher. But politically, his deteriorating health remained hidden from public view. Ramesses commissioned colossal statues depicting himself as eternally youthful. Biceps, flexed chest, broad chin, lifted proudly. In reality, he spent his final years hunched toothless, unable to stand without aid, while his priests praised his divine perfection. And here is a chilling detail few know. His mummy's nose is deeply eroded, not by time, but by a massive untreated dental infection that spread to the bone, likely causing searing facial pain in his last years. Imagine ruling an empire from a golden throne, your every word obeyed by millions, while every breath rattled through rotting teeth and pain burned through your spine like fire. Ramesses II died at over 90 years old, a staggering age for the ancient world. But he died as he lived, a god in the eyes of his people, and a silent carrier of the curse that would one day bring Egypt's royal bloodline to its knees. At number 2, we have the Ptolemies, foreign rulers who came as conquerors and left as victims of the same genetic curse that doomed Egypt's ancient kings. In 323 BCE, after Alexander the Great's sudden death, his general Ptolemy seized Egypt as his prize. But to keep control, he needed to become more than a foreign ruler. He needed to become Pharaoh. Standing in temples lined with images of god-kings marrying their sisters, Ptolemy and his court made a chilling choice. They would copy the Egyptian tradition of sibling marriage to appear divine. For the next 300 years, generation after generation of Ptolemaic rulers married their sisters, nieces and daughters. This wasn't just political alliance. It was systematic genetic self-destruction. Physically, the damage became impossible to hide. Enlarged, protruding jaws that distorted speech. Elongated skulls partly from ritual shaping, partly from congenital deformity. Narrow sunken temples and receding chins. Clubfoot and scoliosis appearing repeatedly in royal children. Psychologically, the horror was deeper. Brothers and sisters raised together as playmates were forced into marriage beds as teenagers. Royal children grew up knowing their destiny was sealed before birth, not by the gods, but by political convenience. And politically, this cycle created a dynasty of rulers trapped in their own bloodline. Each generation weaker than the last, their bodies twisted by genetic isolation, while Egypt itself weakened under foreign rule. Here is a chilling detail few ever hear. By Cleopatra's time, family trees showed brothers who were also uncles, fathers who were also brothers-in-law, and children who were simultaneously siblings and cousins. A tangled genetic web that defied nature itself. Imagine a royal palace where every face looks eerily similar, where deformities are hidden under gold crowns and silken veils, where the very rulers who claimed divine power could barely stand without servants' aid. The Ptolemies thought they were preserving purity. Instead, they perfected incestuous decay, becoming the most genetically isolated dynasty in human history. And their final heir, the woman whose legend still captivates the world, would carry this curse to its tragic end. At number 1, we end with Cleopatra VII, Egypt's final pharaoh immortalized as a seductress and queen of unrivaled beauty. But behind the legends of her charm lay a truth far darker. She was the last flower blooming on a dying genetic tree. Born in 69 BCE to a dynasty that had practiced sibling marriage for over 250 years, Cleopatra entered the world already carrying the accumulated genetic damage of countless incestuous unions. Physically ancient coins and busts reveal a prominent hooked nose, characteristic of her lineage's protruding jaw deformities, a narrow skull and elongated features suggestive of congenital bone shaping mixed with inbreeding traits, possible scoliosis hinted at by posture analysis in statues. Despite this, Roman writers praised her intellect rather than her looks. She spoke 9 languages. She commanded fleets, armies, and political alliances with ruthless precision. But psychologically, Cleopatra must have known the truth. Her royal blood was not divine. It was poisoned. Politically, she sought to break the curse. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony weren't mere romantic affairs. They were desperate genetic lifelines, attempts to introduce new blood into a rotting lineage. But here is a chilling detail few ever hear. The children she bore to these Roman leaders, hope for a genetically healthier future, were systematically murdered by Octavian to eliminate rival claims. With their deaths, Egypt's last chance at redemption vanished. When Cleopatra pressed the asp to her skin in 30 BCE, ending her life, rather than kneeling to Rome, she also ended the most inbred dynasty in human history. Her death was not just political collapse. It was the final breath of a royal bloodline so twisted by its own pride that it could no longer sustain life. Imagine a queen worshipped as Isis reborn, yet her own body bore the hidden legacy of centuries of genetic decay. Her suicide by snakebite was almost merciful compared to the slow, silent rot that had consumed her ancestors from within. These were Egypt's 7 most inbred pharaohs, rulers who built empires of gold, but trapped themselves in bodies of suffering. They believed their blood was divine. They believed purity was power, but in the end it only brought them pain, deformity, and death. Their story is a warning echoing through 5,000 years of history. When power becomes obsession, when lineage becomes religion, humanity is the first sacrifice. If you found these hidden truths as haunting as I did, click like to let the algorithm know you want more stories like this. Subscribe to join us in uncovering the darkest secrets of history's most powerful figures. And tell me in the comments below, which pharaoh's fate shocked you the most, and why? Because here, history never rests in peace.